Hello, guys. This is the part four of our discussions. Bunch of engineers talking about our experiences. Maybe we can help other student engineers or new engineers to transition from education to industry. Today, I have with me Osama from Pakistan, Diego from Brazil, Georgi from Macedonia, and Adil from Pakistan. Our subject is going to be the transition into a job. Last time we talked about finding the job. And this time we're assuming that you have found it and you're about to start and you signed your contract, you moved to the new city and you're ready to go to the office maybe on the first day. And this is what we're going to talk about, what different people get, what different choices they have, and how did that happen? Transition, what kind of tasks they get at the beginning of their job, on the first months of their jobs, at least. So first, I'm going to start by asking Osama, on the first months when you were looking for the job, did you have a specific type of job you were looking for?
Yes. I was fresh out of my master's, and obviously, I wanted a job that was very close to what I had studied in my master's. So I was looking for some typical control theory job, either in the chemical industry like BASF or Bayer, or something maybe also in the automobile industry because I came to Germany and it was a hot field here. But obviously, we talked about this. When you go through the job search process, you sort of widen your expectations as you go. Uh, so at the end, I did get what I wanted, but by that time, I was open to almost anything.
Okay, so you found a job that was close to what you studied and was more or less what you wanted to work at, and you got an offer. Did you have an expectation for that offer, and what did you go for? Tell us a bit more detail, specifically what did you go for?
Um, so you mean financially or what?
Yeah, kind of like as an engineer, what kind of if you're looking for a job, that's your experience, that's what you want, what would be like a salary you expected directly to go for? Uh, and what was it specifically, the kind of job you went for?
Okay. It's a bit of a difficult question because keep in mind, we're talking about 2017 here.
Okay.
Yeah, at the end of 2017. So I got a good job. It had a good reputation. It was in a big automobile company. It was a
Hmm.
tier one supplier. It was not very close to what I had studied in my master's, but they were paying me well. And they were paying me over the whole year, I think about 62,000 euros at that time. So it was at that time a very, very attractive offer compared to my other colleagues.
Hmm.
So obviously, I went very happily. Um, but there could have been some better options. For example, the ideal thing would have been BASF for me. It was very close to my master's. Or even within an automobile company, I was not working with, let's say, the dynamics of a car or the control of the car, which would have been very close to my master's. I was working at more or less as a very generic software engineer, which is not an easy job, but it's also not specialized to any degree program.
Okay. So when you
Yeah.
finish it, when you finish a master studies, at least you have the first standard option of looking for a job offer, applying for a specific one that's close to what you know, and then you could get that, and you're already moved forward to your career. You're starting your career with
Yeah.
that road, with that path. I have also Diego, who had a different kind of a starting path. We'll come back to how things evolved later, but let's just talk for now about the first transition from study to industry. So for you, Diego, you were doing a master's studies with the company. You had almost done. You were looking for a job. What were you specifically looking for, and what did you find? What did you go for?
Well, I think just like everybody else, I was looking for any opportunity. I mean, I couldn't be very picky with the jobs, especially because I was getting rejected by most positions that I applied for. And at the end, I got a job that was related to my thesis, and I only got it because of my thesis. I was working in a department of metal forming,
Hmm.
and then I met this professor from another university that he was looking for a PhD candidate, and then he ended up like referring me to another position in an automotive company, and then I started this PhD with a company in the industry.
So your choice was a
Uh,
hybrid between a research and work in industry.
yeah, originally yes, and back in the time, I remember I had another offer. I was going through this selection process for this trainee program. But at the end, I ended up choosing for the PhD position because I thought it'd be interesting to go a bit more into research, get a PhD degree. And yeah.
So a second option one could have, besides going for the standard job, is having this hybrid case where you are working on a task in an industry setup and you are working on a PhD in parallel with a supervisor, and you go to the company's office, but you have a supervisor in university, and you have this hybrid setup, right?
Yeah, and then usually during the job was very common that I would have to go to the university, let's say 3-4 times in a semester to attend seminars, to go have conversations with the professor, to show my progress, what I was studying or what I was like working on. So
that was
there
a bit more demanding than the standard job, or?
Oh, it depends. Not necessarily. I mean, because you're pretty much working on the research. Other guys in the company, they had many different tasks, and I was doing pretty much everything that I wanted to. So I was planning my work, I was planning what to do next, and I was in control of my tasks and my research. So I had this freedom.
So there's pros and cons. I guess we'll get back to the pros and cons.
Yeah.
But we got an idea of the path you kind of went forward with at the beginning. Again, there is a transition phase. We'll come back to that. Georgi, in your case, you also were finishing a master's. You had a specific goal, maybe kind of an industry you were aiming for. What did you find and what did you go for?
Well, I have the kind of the same story as Osama because we studied the same masters. So yeah, looking for highly specific jobs for what we studied in our masters, and then as time goes on, you apply for broader and broader, or even through educational, let's say, phases, you go lower and lower to the educations you got from the bachelor's and then masters. And with difference from the other guys, I had a bit of a problem, still have actually, because of my German knowledge or the lack of it. So I was kind of like restricted because of that, because I was searching for jobs. I mean, I applied also for German speaking jobs, but yeah, I was looking for English ones, and I got one. I work in One Subsea in Celle, and this is a company that produces the control systems for oil and gas production for subsea. And yeah, it's a standard story of just finishing masters and then getting into the job, which I still have. It's my first job and still work there. Everything okay. So yeah.
So it wasn't too far from your background knowledge, your interest, the kind of jobs you wanted to do.
It's let's say it's not from my masters. I don't use anything where I learned from my masters. It's more from my bachelor's because I was in automation, and we do automation and more like a SCADA systems, if you're familiar with this term. And yeah, that's in that sense it's okay. It's according to my education.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's more or less another kind of standard transition forward, right?
This is the most standard, the most, let's say, boring.
Well, sometimes boring
in a good way.
Better. Sometimes
in a good
pros
way.
and cons, right? Pros and cons, right? So if you didn't go for that direct job, so I'll ask Adil on that. If you didn't go for a direct job, or you couldn't find exactly that job you wanted, and you didn't want to go for whatever hybrid situations of research and industry, but you wanted to transition into a big company, I guess the companies have found a way to bring such people and maybe train them on a certain limited time and then offer later for them a job position. I guess you can tell us more, but what usually they describe this as a graduate training program, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about this setup or this option for a freshly graduate engineer?
Sure. So I had the same master's as Diego had. So it was like a master's in manufacturing technology, and my bachelor's was in mechanical engineering. And for me, there was, since my bachelor's, there was this kind of like, I don't know, hype in Pakistan or in quite some other countries that people somehow do their bachelor's in engineering, and then for master's, they just go for like a management degree, just kind of like to have a hybrid between the two, because they often say like at some point in your career for like promotions in those management positions, you need some management knowledge and those kind of things. But in Germany, I felt like most of the managers actually at most of the top companies, they're all engineers or PhD holders. They're not MBAs or those kind of like management degrees, especially when we talk about the technical heads. So then I found this option of trainee programs, which I think is a good combination between, it's kind of like a practical MBA, let's say. It's a good combination between kind of the management side and the technical side, because some colleagues of mine, they were looking for technical jobs. And then the problem is, after manufacturing engineering, you're like, should I look for something like process development or I don't know, manufacturing planning or whatever? So it becomes very hard, really. And when you don't get jobs in that specific area, then of course, somehow you get demotivated and all. For me, it was like, let's apply for these training programs. 2 years, you keep on working in different, let's say, areas of the supply chain. And then you can really get to experience what you like the most, like on the practical side and not just the theory. So then I applied only for the training programs, and there are normally two kinds of training programs. One of them, as you said, is just like a graduate training program. And then you don't have any kind of like specific side or so, but some companies, they also offer training programs, but they also define somehow the area. So they would say a training program in manufacturing, in quality, or in R&D, something like this. So the thing with the training program is normally only the big companies afford to offer it, because you have to work at different locations in different departments and everything and all. So that's why then mostly the big companies. And I applied to, I don't know, I think 30, 40 companies, got some acceptances. And then I joined a company, a big name in the automotive industry. So we are not the OEMs, but one of the biggest suppliers, something like this. And I would say it was quite good experience. 2 years, different departments of the supply chain, like let's say development and manufacturing and sales and kind of like the corporate quality and those kind of things. So it was quite a good experience to really network with people from all over the world, and then really get to understand what you like the most, something like this. And also at the same time, there is this like on the site and off the site, or on the job, off the job kind of training. So it's not just kind of like you do your technical work and that's it, but it's also kind of like they're trying to develop you as a future leader, which for me was really important somehow. That's why this whole management or MBA kind of degree. So I would say it was kind of like a practical MBA path you can choose, and afterwards you can always just say what side you like the most, and then you can slowly, kind of like go into that area.
So if you want to summarize it, what would be the advantage for you to go for such a choice?
So as a student, the thing is that, I don't know if I should say this, but many people say that you get this kind of like a Ivy League employee, or kind of like a star employee kind of status. I don't know to what extent it's true. Of course, there are trainees who later get to good management positions, but there are also other employees who get to those positions. It's not only trainees. But if you're a trainee, somehow you get like a good platform to do so if you want to, because you have a better network than a regular employee. You are well connected, let's say, and because of that, you get to experience the company's culture, the products, the services, and everything. And that somehow, as they say, the network helps in your career. So I think in that sense, then it's quite nice. And then because it's only the big companies, there is quite some competition and all, of course, but they mostly go for young people for this. So either fresh graduates or people with maximum 2 years experience. So the good thing is you're not competing with those people who have 5 years of experience, so you are just competing with other students somehow. So that I would say somehow helps then.
So it feels a bit fair to you, as all the people there are at the same stage of their career, and at the same time it is an accelerator that could push you forward a bit faster than other people. could, depending on what you do, your
Sure,
performance, right?
sure.
So you might get the opportunity and be too lazy to benefit anything from it, right? What would you think is the advantage for a company for such kind of a setup? Because it is a lot of management to propose such a setup, to follow up, to build it, to train, to move the people around. You know, there's a lot of management behind such a plan, right?
I think, of course, I mean, there could be different reasons for different companies, but my personal point of view might not align with any company's HR. But I personally think when you get these young people from universities or max 1 or 2 years experience, they're still young, and you can mold their minds according to, you know, your own culture and your way of doing things. So if you want your future leaders to look like or to think like a particular way or something like this, of course, I mean, we are all humans, we are not machines, you can't program us. But at the same time, I think, I mean, to some extent, it's hard, it's kind of easy when you're young, you can somehow just be in this whole bubble that, okay, I mean, this is my company, this is our culture, this is what we are. And then it's just easy to, I don't know, keep you motivated somehow because you are somehow young and all. And also, secondly, I think because you get to experience many different, let's say, many different departments and different locations and all, you are young, it's easy for you to move around, you know, compared to someone with a family and all. So this somehow helps the companies to give you kind of like a good impression of everything, kind of like an overall overview. And then afterwards, it's kind of, let's say, you get to understand the company better, which is hard then to do for someone who is already 40 years old and with a family working in a particular field. Because even if you offer them something, they might say, I'm happy in this town, I'm not going anywhere else. But with young people, they have this opportunity to, it's the same thing, like people are like consultants at some of the big companies in the industry, you know, because there is this whole hype of like traveling around, seeing places, meeting people and all. And this helps those consultancies to somehow make you like a all-rounder, you know, just give you kind of like an overview of everything. Yeah.
I would imagine young people are usually more motivated to explore, to try things, to move around. And the older, more experienced people are more looking for comfort and stability than the young people, right? So that also fits the time scale of where you join in and where do you reach maybe the higher positions. And somebody leaving a company after 20 years and moving to another one might have a lot of difficulties to transition right into the new mindset, the new setup, the new way the company operates. I guess maybe that's another way to look at it. That's a good important point. So sometimes even as engineers looking for a job, it's quite interesting to understand what are the companies looking for, not just me, what I need. What do they need? What are they looking for, and what works for them? And if you know that, then that also could help you improve your chances, right?
Sure.
Okay. Before I move to other part, we mentioned this training program, and we have another person with us here who went through the process. Diego, can you tell us a bit, how did you make that switch? Because you started on the hybrid process and then you went back to the graduate program.
Well, after about a year in this PhD position in my previous company, the company overall went through a transformation. They were laying off some people. There was a huge, let's say, budget cut in every single department, and then there's some complications with a few projects. Also, there was a tension between the company and the professor, and then they decided to end this partnership. I could have stayed in the company and continued my project, but it was getting too stressful in a way that I was not very excited anymore about the position, about the way things were going. And then I started looking for new opportunities. And I've just like Adil, I always wanted to do and join a trainee program, because I always thought it'd be a good opportunity to work in different areas, get different experiences. And then I was looking for different positions. I found one, applied, and then eventually I was offered a position to start a program. Then I decided to, just quit the PhD. Maybe in the future, I might have the chance to do start another PhD. But until then, I decided, okay, I'll just go for the trainee, and we'll see what happens after 2 years. So I did. Was a great experience. Learned a lot. Just like Adil said, you usually companies that offer the trainee positions, they train you to become leaders. So it's a bit easier for you to get like leadership positions, to get to management positions. And this was really interesting for me as well, because then you learn about the business, you go to different departments. You don't only stay in manufacturing, but you also go to purchase, you go to design, and then you work with different people, you build a network. And this is also really good. I mean, this past 2 years that I worked as a trainee was really great. And after I finished my program, I got offered a position. And since then, I've been in the same company.
So somehow after you go through this and you succeed and you pass through it, and then you transition to another position, or you transition to the fixed position, it's like already you got through this training phase and you got the stamp of approval. This guy can be a manager.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's I think it's interesting that you get to learn the business from different perspectives, because you have people that they join the company and they've been doing the same thing for the past 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And they don't know anything else from what they do in that very specific area. And as a trainee, let's say you're forced to learn about the entire business. You have to go to different departments. You have to meet different people. And this is also really good. And on top of that, they're trying to train you to become the leader, to be a person that will be in charge in the future. So for me, that's a big advantage.
So it's good that you.
Sorry, I have a question. Like, how many people from these programs go into managers or management position, and how many stay in engineering? Let's say.
Okay.
Do you know? Do we have some information on this?
Depends. I can talk. I don't have the numbers. I cannot tell you, okay, how many people go into management. But one thing that I can say is that my company in the headquarters in UK, I would say that more than 90% of the managers were trainees.
Yeah, that's the same thing for us as well. Yeah.
At some point, maybe back in the 80s and the 90s, and now they're managers. But almost everybody is a manager.
Yeah.
Here in Germany, I know a few people from manufacturing engineering that they got to team lead positions, they got to management positions. But in Germany, it's a bit more difficult because it's a bit more competitive, and they also prefer to have Germans in such positions. So also not that easy.
I think it's changing slowly. I mean, there are slowly more and more, let's say, international people in those positions, because I mean, companies also realize that, diversity really matters and brings this whole kind of different perspective to things. And for us as well, I mean, of course, I can't say a number, 90% or how many, but most of the managers I have talked to, they were trainee at some point, or they have done like a PhD or so. But for us, you can take like 2 to 3 different lines. So you can say, hey, I don't want to be a manager. I just want to become an expert of something, right? Or you say, I would like to go towards the management side, or kind of like the project management side. That I work on different projects for 3 to 4 years, and that's pretty much it. I'm good at project management. So of course, I mean, finishing the program itself is not, Rami, it's not just a stamp that says, hey, now you're a manager. So this was your first step somehow. And then companies have other programs or things in place internally, and then they get those people in those kind of programs, and then slowly bring them towards those, like prepare them for those management positions. But because of the training program, you get kind of like a head start, let's say.
Initiated.
My question was more like from the trainees, how many go into managers, not the other way around, how many the managers are trainees.
I think it depends upon the department. So for instance, for us, and I'm not speaking on the
feeling,
so the thing
not
is
numbers.
Sure. So not just for my company, I have been talking to some trainees from some other companies as well. So if you go to manufacturing or logistics, let's say something like this, and mostly you deal with the operators on the shop floor, then you might just right after the training program become a manager for like 10, 15, even 20 people. But if you're working in R&D or kind of like in an engineering department, then you have people sitting there who have years of experience, right? And they might be PhD holders and all. So they can't just make you their manager right after the training program. So they will say yeah, you could be like a manager for a sub project or a main project, and then slowly you work your way up then in these kind of departments to management then.
Be careful without drifting too much outside of the scope of our discussion, but I think we already went into that question in a way or another. So I'm going to ask it, and I would like you all to kind of answer it in a brief way. Does every engineer have to become a manager to be successful in his career?
No.
So manager,
depends
is it
how you
should
define a
it be a
successful
goal for
career.
every engineer? Should it be a goal for every engineer to become a manager?
What is a
No.
successful? What is success? Define that first.
So we'll go
I
into a
think-
long philosophical discussion. Let's not
I
go
think-
there. Let's not go there.
I
But
think the
some
way-
people, just let me say that some people, based on their personality, they will have definitely a better success being a manager than the technical driven engineer, and a big other portion of those people are more successful being the technical driven engineer than the manager. And I guess I don't have the numbers either, but from the people who go into any company that has any type of industry, any type of engineering or other non-engineering, it's always maybe 10% who are the managing team, and the rest are the remaining staff. So if you have 100 doing whatever training, you maybe maximum would have 20, 30% becoming the managers, and they don't become all the managers on the next day. Every 10 years one will leave the job, the other will reach that goal, the other will choose never to reach that goal, or he doesn't have it as a goal to begin with, right? So let's not go into the manager discussion. Let's just stay with the engineers discussion. Management is a very important direction that an engineer can choose to go for, right? But it's not necessarily the engineer's end goal, right? Not every engineers want to become a manager. Obviously, that comes from some background, some preferences, some personality, and that changes a lot. Let's go back to the options of what does an engineer has as an option. So that's an option that an engineer could do the graduate program, can have an advantage there to eventually become a manager if he wants to. You know,
Or
if
an
he works
expert.
hard enough, he can.
Or
get
an
there.
expert. I mean, you
Or
can
an
become an expert, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
like you are guiding people worldwide then in that
Okay.
particular area, you know. So
Yeah. So we're going to get now to one more option that many engineers, especially studying in Germany and finishing their studies in Germany as a master studies, there's one more option, which is the PhD option. Just go directly, stay maybe where you are in the university, or transition into another university and start your PhD career. You start your doctorate research, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of names for it depending on the setup. And I think we have here at least with us me and Osama, who have went into that option. Osama first went to the company option, got the job, got the whatever, the package, worked, got paid, and then he transitioned back again to research. So why did you make that decision? How does that usually happen?
So for me, the reasons are a bit more particular to me. But what typically happens is you have two kinds of people who are doing this. Either they've always been interested in research, they went into a job, they didn't find it very interesting, went back to research. And the other reason why people go to a PhD, especially in Germany, is because it's also a gateway to higher positions in the company. That's how some people see it. For me, because I am not from Germany, I felt I was stuck inside a very German technology, let's say automotive development, that happens mostly in Germany and in some very developed countries. So I wanted to get out of this constraint. So I said, okay, you know what? I liked research. Let's go to research. I'll be universally employable or internationally employable with a PhD. So that was my reason to go into it.
How did you find a PhD? How do you get a PhD?
So I started writing to professors. To be honest, it's much easier when you're already living in Germany to find a PhD in Germany. So I wrote to professors. It's like a normal job application.
So you
But-
don't write to an HR team. You can,
No.
but in many cases, it's good to go to the professor who's
Yeah.
supervising a specific research subject. You select that professor, you send him directly an email, and
Yeah.
what do you tell that professor?
So it's a bit difficult as compared to a job because a lot of professors don't advertise their positions. Yeah, you have very few, let's say, job portals of universities. You have some, but not always. So what I used to do was I used to go to university websites, go to the department, look at the name of the institutes or chairs that sound interesting. Yeah, so I had a couple of fields in my mind that I wanted to go into. And then I used to look at the research that they're doing. I would look at the institute if they actually have a vacancy. Some of them do, some of them don't. So if they have a vacancy, I would apply for that vacancy like a normal job. Otherwise, I would just write, yeah, professor, I like your research. Do you have a position open? I would like to work in this area. And here's my CV, here's my grades. So the position that I got at RWTH, so that was already a Stellenangebot. And
It's a position
so
offer. It's a packaged offer, you would say, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was also a bit of a struggle to find a PhD because sometimes, I used to go to interviews and the professors have a very specific thing in mind. So sometimes
that's what I wanted to ask you. So in the case of
Yeah.
PhD, it's an extremely specific topic, right?
Yeah.
And your interviewer is not just another engineer or an HR who's going to just ask you, the general questions. So you had interviews, I guess, as you said, maybe you had more than one, and the professor
Yeah.
would ask you a very specific subject, right? So
Yeah.
how does that go?
So it can be quite brutal sometimes. So one professor, for example, he asked me for my thesis and then he interviewed me and told me my thesis was wrong, the master thesis. I said, okay, if you say so. And then another professor,
That boosted your confidence, I guess, right?
Yeah. He actually had the whole interview from me. He asked me to give my master thesis presentation again. And then he actually sat me down with a piece of paper and he started with very basic algebra. Like, okay, tell me what are eigenvectors. And I said, yeah, that's a formula. That's a formula. Tell me what they are. And it was also a bit brutal because it had been a long time since I studied mathematics. But it can also be something like my current professor. They're working with sort of systems engineering and a bit more abstract engineering. And they were much more interested that I have a background from automotive industry, and then I could help them bring a perspective from that industry related to system design and these kind of things. So it could be simple or it could be very brutal interview for PhD.
So that kind of a transition to an industry and back to a PhD kind of gave you an advantage in this case.
Yeah, for my current PhD,
you had the experience in automotive or kind of that field, and then that was a plus for you now to be selected for this research subject, let's say.
Yeah, so the professor has sort of marketing in his pocket. So, I want a project from, let's say, VW, and here I have an expert from the field who's also worked practically.
Yeah. Just a quick question. I mean, how many years of experience did you have? 2, 3?
2.
2 years, yeah. So, I mean, up to 2 or 3 years or max 5, you would say is okay? Or is it also possible to work, I don't know, like 8 to 10 years and then start a PhD? Will it then be an advantage or a disadvantage? Like, do you see people around you in that age group doing a PhD?
No. I am also already an old guy in my institute after 2 years of experience. The problem is, Adil, it is very difficult for after 8 years, because even for me, I was used to the industry mindset, leaving your work at the office, you work for a big project, you're an employee of the company, versus the PhD attitude that you own what you do, you're responsible for what you do.
Yeah.
And also it's kind of a bit of a student life, and also financially, I can imagine that if you go after 8 years to a PhD, you'll have a big drop in your income. So,
but isn't this something very specific to Germany? That, I mean, you have very young PhD candidates. I mean, I don't know how it's in your home country, but in Brazil, in the US, you see like a lot more older people doing PhD. Usually they go to work, and then after, I don't know, 10, 15, even 20 years working, they decided, okay, I'll go to a PhD.
I think that's like midlife crisis or so. They're
Nah,
done with
come
their
on.
job.
Well, that's
Yeah.
not the experience that I had growing up in Brazil, seeing people going for PhD, and even in the US, I've seen people going for PhD at age 40,
Mhm.
45.
Never heard of this
I
myself.
think that
Yeah,
there's a
that's exactly why I was
yeah.
asking, because some people they often I help some students with this like study abroad, work abroad thing and all, and students they often ask like, hey, I have I don't know 5, 8, so many years of experience. Will I get a PhD or am I somehow too old or so? You know, so.
Mhm.
I think I can say specifically about mechanical engineering, at least what I'm doing, is the difficulty would be if someone has been in industry for years. If he goes back to research, he will need to kind of catch up with all that programming, robotic control,
Mm.
whatever CAD work and advanced stuff with simulation that probably he's been like for years never been using. And not just that, it has evolved that he just, like whatever he knew is no longer the same. So in special technical fields, that becomes difficult, not impossible, but difficult. Maybe in like philosophy, you can do a PhD in philosophy because nothing really changes that quick that much in that subject, right? For example. But for engineering specific, I think the reason maybe most young people go for it is that they
Well,
are up to date with the content. It's an
Yeah.
easy transition
yeah, but
for
it
them.
depends a lot on what you're doing. I mean, if you're working with engineering,
Mhm.
and I mean, I'm sure that in any engineering company nowadays, whatever you're doing, you're probably working with the most up-to-date software.
Yeah.
So if you go to do a research in the same area or in a similar topic, I think you'd be just fine.
I
Well,
think it's also like the way they kind of like sell it, you know. I mean, you're already at the uni doing your bachelor's, master's. It's pretty common in Germany that people don't really change their unis, you know. They
Yeah.
stick to one uni, they
Yeah.
do their bachelor's, their master's, and then they're like, maybe 4 more years or 5 or whatever, and then let's
Yeah.
just be done with it and then go
I
to
will,
industry, you know.
I will tell you a related incident here. When I was applying for PhDs, I had an interview at Huawei, and I already had the whole process down. And we were looking for professors.
Mhm.
And one of the professors, when he looked at he heard that I was already working in the industry. The first question he asked was, "How old are you?"
Okay.
And then when I answered that, I was I think 27 at the time. I said, "Okay, that is right age for a PhD. So you're not too old." So,
Okay.
so I think at least some of the professors have this in mind that the guy should not be too young. It should not be above maybe
I
33 or
mean, as
something.
you said,
Ageist.
like as you said, in some PhDs, the thing is they're paying you like a kind of like a stipend just to do your PhD work. But in your case, or in many PhDs in Germany, the thing is they're paying you to really work there for 35 to 40 hours a week, and then you're supposed to do PhD in your own time somehow. So that means maybe I don't know, working 60 hours a week. And I don't think like people who are 35 or 40 can pull that off. I mean, especially with a family, or
Yeah. Also, I think professors, at least my professor, I've seen this mindset that they have also in mind that we are sort of building up researchers. So the age needs to be young so that they can instill some certain thinking styles or working style within the guys.
So it's
Or
kind of the
girls.
same thing as companies then. Like you need the
Yeah.
person to be young enough to be moldable, let's say, and
Yeah.
shapeable to have that mindset. So if you start as
Yeah.
a researcher with a researcher mindset, you will move on with that efficiently. And if you start as a whatever a management mindset, you can move on and build up on that efficiently,
Yeah.
right? You can always a lot of people in their lives, have switched at some point, but their past I would know, and I know some people, it's very difficult to like after you've worked for many years and then you switch back to research, or you've done research and then you switch to production or whatever. So these kind of jumps after a long time, building those kind of, let's say, habits or natural feel in your position becomes difficult. So as early as possible, when you know where you want to go, that's good, but you don't always know, right?
Yeah, for sure. I was kind of with the idea of doing a PhD even before starting the masters.
Mm-hmm.
But after my experience with the masters, I was, yeah.
You gave up on that
you were
easily?
like, that's it.
Your thesis is the make or break point.
Why?
For
Yeah, why?
most
Why? Can you
people.
tell us
I d-
why did you change your mind?
it was too stressful for me. I couldn't take it psychologically, let's say. It was, and I didn't maybe see the point of it, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I wasn't in love with the thing I was doing, so maybe it it wasn't worth the struggle I did it. Maybe that's it. But yeah, it's already difficult even to find something, whatever, here when you're let's say kind of like an immigrant. And then yeah, it's difficult to find what you really love, or maybe even when you try something, you find out,
Yeah.
okay, this is not what I wanted.
I think there is also this kind of let's say misunderstanding that many people, at least I can say, based on my let's say conversations with many people from Pakistan, that they're like, yeah, a PhD mostly means kind of like staying in the academia, right? But in Germany, that's not the case. I mean, many people after their PhDs, they actually go to the industry, so they are building their profile for the industry. And in industry, I can imagine why industries really value PhDs a lot, because they're like, yeah, I mean, it was a project this person was managing, and next to the project, there were many other kind of like administrative things. And then within the project as well, you collaborate maybe with industry, with other stakeholders, with your team and all. And then you're having some teaching experience maybe. So this whole kind of like managing a project for 3 to 4 years, bringing it to an end, you know, problem solving and all. And this is mostly you're doing in industry as well. I mean, no project ever finishes in 2 weeks. You know, you take like 2, 3, 4, or maybe even 10 years for projects. But in many other countries, people think like, yeah, PhD is just like academia, so I don't really want to do it. You know?
It's important that you said that. It's important for me to mention I'm doing my PhD at the moment. I'm managing my own project, which is going to take 4 to 5 years usually. Any other PhD also takes the same time on average. But at the same time, I'm supervising 9 projects for 9 students that are not necessarily on the same subject. So you're managing already a team, let's say, of 9 people, and you have to manage each one's whatever requirements, process, procedure. Besides the work, you have to also manage each one submitting his own report, doing his own presentation, presenting that work, summarizing it, you know. So you're following up on several projects from start to end, which is a managerial experience. And you're also managing the tools, because you have to assign access to the students to use different tools, different machines at different times, train them on those different tools. So there's like all that experience within the PhD. I'm talking again from my perspective of mechanical manufacturing. Some other fields might not have all that. And what I know from people who have graduated, who have finished their PhDs, a lot of them are thought of or looked for managerial positions, because that's a demonstration of managerial skill. If you successfully managed several students and finished your project, plus sometimes 2 other industrial projects that you're involved in, plus another project that you're involved in at the same time. So PhD has different types and different ways of how it runs. But again, you already mentioned, and I guess the guys also mentioned, that in Germany, it's more or less a special case. And in engineering, it's a lot of things at the same time in general. There are those PhDs where it's like a study, masters, you have those lectures you take, you have those exams you do, you have that subject, and then you're 3 years and you have to be done. So these are also PhDs, but they are a very different setup. They're not so common in Germany, actually.
Yeah, I mean, some universities, they focus a lot on, let's say, some research papers, and they're like, yeah, 3 years, you won't get any extensions, 2 papers every 6 months or so, let's say, and then you're pretty much done. You take the last 6 months to write maybe your thesis, and then you're done with the PhD. That's it.
Yeah.
So it's very different kind of experience than for those people.
Not 6 months, Adil.
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
6
of
months.
course, you start writing it as soon as possible. But I mean, they give them time only in the last 6 months to really compile everything all together, because in the months before, they're really kind of pushed to publish papers, right? So they cannot really work on their own thesis.
Let's get back to the jobs. I have a list of kind of let's call them kind of a fast question for each one of you, and then we go back to something else. Diego, along all those jobs that you transitioned from and into as engineering job, did you ever use partial differential equation and trigonometry again?
Well, I must say that when I was working at Opel, like I did use some of the knowledge from my master's. because
Okay.
I was doing simulation, I was doing some research.
It included algebra.
I had to, let's say, check a few equations, take a look, but
Okay.
I didn't have to, let's say, apply anything at that point in time.
Okay.
So,
But
and then after that, during my trainee, I didn't use it at all.
okay. Okay. So at some point you might need it, but you don't necessarily need it.
I
In
think
your
he
case.
needed it when he was doing a PhD, not when he was
Exactly.
doing it.
But for trainee in the industry, you won't need
Okay.
it.
You won't
Yeah.
use any trigonometry, any algebra.
No.
Okay. Georgi, is it the same for you?
The point of this question I don't like, and there is a huge discussion behind it. But to
Yeah.
be short, no, I didn't use anything from my masters or even
Yeah.
trigonometry or
So
whatever.
this is a common statement by a lot of people when they study mathematics, is that like we will never use those again. But I know also your point that you're not necessarily gonna use the same equation, but you get the logic behind it, you get the thinking
Yeah.
method behind it.
I fully
Also, you
support.
might need to use them. That's the point.
I fully
You might.
support everything that we studied, even though I use
Okay.
nothing. Even though I
Yeah.
literally I don't use anything.
Okay. Osama, did you use those equations? Maybe now you're back to research. Are you
yeah.
using trigonometry?
I mean, in my job, not at all. Here,
Yeah.
it's a mix. I mean, you also have to teach these things now, you know.
Okay.
So maybe that counts as using.
Okay.
Mhm.
So more or less, but you're involved in the subject still.
Yeah. So because the thing about research is I'm doing some statistics now, but
Mhm.
you might not. I might get a project, let's say, in the next 6 months or something, where I have to do some dynamics modeling, and there you might get some
But
differential
in
equations.
such statistics, you are still using some equations, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
probability and these kind of things.
And Adil?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think because this was this whole training program thing, when I was like working with the development team, we were kind of looking at some theoretical things, but mostly it's about implementation of some of those things, but very few. I mean, so I'm in quality management nowadays, and we have like a lot of problem solving going on. And for that, then you do kind of like, get some support from those theoretical models. But of course, the case studies are very different somehow. It's not like those simple kind of things you saw like during your studies and all. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say, I mean, you do use something, but it's mainly that kind of mindset you use. So studying manufacturing engineering, when I look at new manufacturing processes, I'm not really, I mean, I'm confident enough to say, yeah, I don't care what kind of process it is. If I sit down, I mean, take some time, I will kind of like get to understand it, So it's that kind of mindset and confidence you have. But yeah.
So you have a solid background to adapt to whatever
Yeah,
information you need
kind
to
of, yeah.
learn new again. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you had no idea what algebra is, you were really bad at it, and then you have an equation, no matter how small it is, if you're just not comfortable with it, it's just not gonna work, right?
Mhm.
I'm gonna close this with again kind of a series of a question, but this is a bit to clarify, like as an engineer, what are you doing at the moment in your job? So not to go into too much detail, but can you summarize in a very simple way, clarify if you want also, what is a core task, one core task that you do now in your job? So maybe I can start with Georgi if you want.
Yeah, so programming. That's it. Software programming, but it's not on the level of everybody that knows like I don't know, the proper software engineers or whatever. It's more engineering programming because it's SCADA system, so it's
not a specific language commonly known, it's a specific industrial.
It's near like C, the C programming language,
Yeah.
but it's not like the high-end like web programming or app programming or whatever. It's pure like engineer type of programming. That's my core assignment.
Like
and
a
then
logic programming.
Yeah, kind of, yeah, logical.
Okay.
And then maybe the minor point is documentation.
There's a lot of work on that, right?
A minor point, huh?
So okay. So how, just kind of again an approximate, how much is the percentage of documentation in your daily work hours?
Actually, I wouldn't say that much. It's more like periodical, but let's say, I don't know, 10%, 20%.
Okay, no, that's
It's not much.
reasonable. That's reasonable. For you, Osama, what's like one core task that you work on as a researcher on whatever topic you're working on?
So we are sort of making process architectures, which is a lot of meetings, thinking about where this goes and what this is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's also programming, not as engineering as Georgie,
Yeah.
but somewhere in the middle of like IT apps development and what Georgie is doing. So C++ and some GUI development.
But you expect more user interaction or direct user.
Yeah. So we're working with simulations. So you have to have a visual and an interactive element for that. Yeah.
Okay. And Diego, at the moment, what would be a core task?
I would say assembly planning. So more of like process improvement. Because I work in a production line. We're just assembling the engine. So it's just like planning the production process, the assembly process, improving the process. So, and of course, working on various types of documentations to support this like process improvement.
Well, maybe we'll have to talk at some point for 50 minutes. How important are documentations and why do we do them? But they are a very important part of the job, and they are for continuity. If somebody has to join in, somebody has to continue, you always need reliability, responsibility. You always need to document the steps.
Some of them,
Yeah, I'm not generalizing. I'm saying most, but it needs its own discussion, right? Like what's the paperwork along the way, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. For bureaucratic whatever job reasons, and sometimes for the job reasons, for the task reasons, you need to document the task itself. Adil, the same question for you, like a core task that you at the moment perform.
So at the moment I'm working in the corporate quality, so kind of like the quality headquarters, something like this. Like we have industry 4.0, we also have this quality 4.0 thing. So a lot of things happening at the same time. I mean, you have to have this quality 4.0 strategy. So there is this like strategy planning, and then you need to digitalize your processes so that you're ready for this whole integration of everything all together in quality 4.0. And then, of course, you exploit your data then for further use cases and all. So, I mean, there are quite some things going on, but mostly it's about, let's say, some digitalization and some coordination so that you make sure that everyone is on the same page, more or less.
Okay, so I'm gonna close this with one last question to all of you.
You said
there's
this
a lot
already.
to talk about. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm worried that if I start diving into some of those subjects, this could go for hours. So we'll have to do part 3 and 4 and 5 of this. But just to kind of close the subject itself of when you're jumping into the industry, going into the job, what are interesting things each one of you kind of experienced by just starting the job, going on to the office on the first day? So how is that? How does that go? And any tips for people just going into their job, the first job, into the, I don't know, next week, starting their first job? Go with Diego first.
You're muted.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, for me, the first day, just go there, try to get to see what's happening, try to get to meet people, see who can help you in the first few days. It's always good to make like good connections at the very beginning, so you can find a direction. Like, right, yeah. But sometimes it can be difficult, especially if you're a foreigner working for a German company and you don't know how things work, you don't know how everything is. It's good to find the right people to like point you. Okay, do this, go in this direction, so you can get everything up to speed and keep going on your own.
You felt that there were enough people willing to help or motivated to help?
Yeah, more than I expected, actually. I mean, as we talked about before about like the German culture and how people are a bit closed, I was quite surprised on how people were at work. I found people that were really helpful, willing to teach me things and show me how everything works. So it was quite surprising.
And Georgi?
The first funny thing I remembered when you ask is remembering names. That was yeah,
Yeah.
because I worked. I'm still working in the same department with 30 or something people, like in the
Yeah.
same kind of open corridor,
You know
like
the names
open
now?
offices. Yeah, more or less.
Is it too rude to have a copybook and just write the names and walk
The
around with the
beginning, no.
copybook?
At the beginning, no. It's okay. I even
fine.
we at the start of the corridor, we even had
Yeah.
like a full organogram
Mhm.
with everybody where
Oh.
is sitting with picture
Okay.
and the name. So even
Very
people like from other departments, if they come,
Mhm.
they would see like, okay, I'm looking for this guy. He sits there. So
Okay.
that helped a lot.
Yeah, but the problem is
Okay.
it's easy to remember the first names, but in Germany you can't call them by their first name on the first day. You know, that's the problem.
I don't know. For us, it's
Yeah.
okay. I
For
I
on first
mean,
name basis
if
with even my managers and everything.
Yeah.
sure, if they offer you, yes, but you can
You're not
directly
allowed.
say it yourself. If they offer you, if they introduce themselves, and right away say, yeah, you can like call me by first name, okay, but you cannot assume that I can call them by their first name.
Okay,
So
good
I
to
think
know.
it's I
I
think
To know
always
even
didn't
for
know
me.
why.
corporate office.
too late. Yeah. Osama, how was
Okay.
your experience?
Yeah, I think it's a bit overwhelming because you feel like an adult the first time. You're actually responsible for things now.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, you have sort of like from the university, the things are all in the fuzz. You don't really know what you've learned, and then you feel a bit okay. I hope no one
Yeah.
finds out. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Adil?
Yeah, I would say I had this kind of thing in mind that yes, I mean the company is paying you, so they expect things from you, and then
Yeah.
kind of like from day one, it's just
Yeah.
like game on. But I experienced like they took some. I mean, you get this kind of image that hey, it's fine, just take some time. I mean, it could be some days or even some weeks to really settle down, try to
Mhm.
understand how company works, how things work, and all. And that was nice. I mean, somehow to have this feeling that hey, it's okay, it's a big organization, but they're giving you enough time to really understand it. And then people were also really helpful. I mean, as Diego said, for some reason we get this image that yeah, I mean, as a foreigner you have some, I don't know, difficulties or whatsoever. But I would say that might be the case, I don't know, in daily life on the street. But when you talk about professional life and companies and all, then for some reason, I mean, I felt that some people even went like um, kind of like an extra mile to really help you because they think you're not from here, you don't understand things, you know. So that was nice.
So you get that pass, that small pass. If he said something not totally, socially accepted, they would say, "Oh, he doesn't know foreigner. That's fine. We'll tell him later about it."
Or maybe
Actually-
doesn't speak good German, you know. So you
Not
also
even,
get
yeah.
this.
Actually,
Yeah.
I'm using that card for awkward questions.
I
Yeah,
see,
but
I see.
how else you gonna find out about a culture if you don't ask?
Yeah,
Like,
Mhm,
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Actually,
is
it
this
does
okay
happen
or
here,
not?
right?
Like, what's
Yeah.
going on here in
Sure.
this country? Like,
Okay.
so I'm using that card
You're
often.
still using that.
Yeah, for sure. I
So
will use
it's
it.
good.
Come on.
Yeah, it's good they don't give you like the weird face, that they would at least explain to you. No, you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. Rather than just look at you and stare at you. That would
But
be a bit
But I'm honest from
uncomfortable.
the front. Like from the front,
Yeah.
I'm asking like, okay, I don't understand. I don't know if
Okay. Yeah,
I'm breaking something, but I just need to know like
I
what's
see.
going on
I see.
about
Yeah,
this.
it's
Which
good.
brötchen
It's
should
good
I
to be
get for
clear.
breakfast? Which bread should I get for breakfast?
Okay, so for this subject, I guess we're gonna stop here. There's a lot more, but we'll have another part to continue from there. Thank you guys for sharing with me and with the people who's gonna watch this, your personal experience, your personal opinion on a job for an engineer going into the career path, starting on a career path. That was quite interesting, quite informing. Thank you for this, and hopefully we'll have another part. Ciao.
Yeah.
Ciao,
Good
ciao.
day. Bye.
All right.